There are roughly 200,000 of them in Los Angeles. You've seen them without knowing it. A stucco box, 2 stories of apartments floating above an open carport, supported by nothing but a row of thin metal columns. No walls at ground level, just air and concrete and a few parked cars. They have names like the Palomar or Casa del Sol in faded mid-century script. They're on almost every residential block in Hollywood, Van Nuys, Palms, Culver City, and the San Fernando Valley. They are the single most common residential building type in the city. In a major earthquake, the open ground floor collapses first. The upper floors drop straight onto the carport. Engineers call it a soft-story pancake failure. USGS modeled a magnitude 7.8 on the San Andreas Fault and projected more than 1,800 deaths, with dingbat-dense neighborhoods in the direct damage corridor. This building was not designed this way, despite the parking underneath. It was designed this way because of it. That distinction is the whole story. Start with the numbers, because the numbers are staggering. Approximately 200,000 dingbat-style apartment buildings in Los Angeles. Not 200,000 units, 200,000 buildings. Concentrated in Hollywood, the San Fernando Valley, Palms, West Los Angeles, Culver City, East Hollywood. Drive almost any residential block in those neighborhoods, and you will see them. A boxy stucco building, a carport underneath, apartments above, the whole structure cantilevered over open air on thin steel columns with no walls at the base. Soft-story buildings, the category dingbats belong to, are 5 times more likely to fail in a major earthquake than properly reinforced structures. In 1994, when the magnitude 6.7 Northridge earthquake hit at 4:31 in the morning, more than 200 soft-story buildings in Los Angeles collapsed or were severely damaged. That was the dominant structural failure category of the entire event, and Northridge was not the worst-case scenario. The USGS shakeout scenario, published in 2008, modeled a magnitude 7.8 on the southern San Andreas Fault and projected more than 1,800 deaths, 50,000 injuries, and $200 billion in damage. The California legislature's own Joint Informational Hearing Report puts the probability of a magnitude 6.7 or greater earthquake in Southern California by 2043 at 93%. Northridge was exactly 6.7, and most people sleeping in dingbats tonight have no idea their building is on the list. Meanwhile, Tokyo, a city sitting on comparable seismic exposure, reached roughly 90% national housing earthquake resistance by 2023, according to Japan's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism. Los Angeles's mandatory retrofit list covers 13,500 of its most dangerous buildings. As of early 2024, approximately 48 to 50% of them had completed retrofits. The rest are still standing exactly as built. The building has a name. In the early 1970s, architect Francis Ventur coined the term while teaching at UCLA and living in one. British architectural critic Rainer Banham popularized it in his 1971 book, Los Angeles, The Architecture of Four Ecologies, dingbat. It refers to the starburst ornaments on the facades, little atomic-era flourishes that gave these buildings their faintly cheerful, faintly absurd character. 2 stories, wood frame, stucco skin, 5 to 12 units on a standard 7,500 square foot lot. Ground floor entirely open for carport parking. Upper floors cantilevered over that open bay on thin steel columns with no sheer walls. The structural problem is not subtle. The upper floors are rigid and heavy. The ground floor has almost no lateral resistance. When an earthquake generates shaking, it creates lateral force, a sideways push through the building. In a properly built structure, shear walls transfer that force down through every floor to the foundation. In a dingbat, there are no shear walls at the base. The thin columns absorb what they can and then they shear. The upper mass has nowhere to go but straight down. John Van de Lint, professor of civil and environmental engineering at Colorado State University, describes it as pulling the rug out from underneath the building. The ground floor lateral stiffness in these buildings runs as low as 30 to 40% of the stiffness in the floors above. That mismatch is the entire failure. The common assumption is that dingbats failed in Northridge because they were old, or cheaply built, or badly maintained. That explanation is wrong. In 1994, buildings of nearly identical age and construction with intact ground floor walls survived Northridge on the same streets with minor damage. The collapse variable was not age, it was geometry. And engineers in California identified that geometry as a seismic collapse risk in the late 1960s and early 1970s, before the dingbat construction wave had even ended. Japan's 1981 new anti-seismic design standard, known as shintation, specifically banned the open ground floor configuration for new residential construction and then launched a program to retrofit everything that predated it. Los Angeles's building code did not phase out the soft story form through regulation. The market stopped building dingbats in the mid-1970s because land prices rose high enough that developers began assembling larger parcels where a different structural approach became viable. The dangerous building didn't stop because it was recognized as dangerous. It stopped because it became less profitable. Dr. Lucy Jones joined the U.S. Geological Survey in 1983. For the next 3 decades, she was the person Southern Californians heard after earthquakes, calm, precise, with small children occasionally visible behind her at press conferences. She earned a level of public trust almost unprecedented for a federal scientist. She was also, quietly, accumulating the most detailed picture anyone had ever assembled of what happens to Los Angeles in a major seismic event. In 2008, Jones led the team that produced the USGS Shakeout Scenario, Open File Report 2008-1150, the most comprehensive earthquake damage model ever built for Southern California. It modeled a magnitude 7.8 on the southern San Andreas Fault. The results were not a surprise to seismologists. They were a formal, documented, public accounting of what was already known. Soft-story wood frame buildings, dingbat neighborhoods, specifically, appeared as the single largest projected source of residential casualties. The report identified the problem, named it, quantified it, put it into the record. 6 years later, in 2014, Mayor Eric Garcetti hired Jones as his official earthquake safety advisor. Her mandate explicitly included pre-1997 soft first-story buildings. She sat with building officials, city council members, landlord groups, and tenant advocates. She said publicly what she had documented for years. We've put 10 million people on top of 100 faults. We know that we have hundreds of thousands of buildings that will not be able to be occupied. In November 2015, Ordinances 18389-3 and 184081 passed the Los Angeles City Council by a unanimous vote. Garcetti signed them the same day and called them the toughest seismic code in the nation. Jones publicly applauded. She had the science in 2008. She had the mayor's attention in 2014. She got the law in 2015. The shakeout scenario was published 7 years before the ordinance passed. The ordinance passed 9 years before its final compliance deadline. As of early 2024, it is still less than half complete. Jones is not a frustrated outsider. She is the person who did everything right, produced the research, engaged the politics, got the law, and is still watching the building stand. That is the shape of this problem. Here is where it gets specific. In 1946, Los Angeles enacted a parking minimums ordinance. Every new residential building would be required to provide off-street vehicle storage on site. The rule was a direct response to post-war car ownership. People were buying automobiles faster than streets could absorb them. The solution seemed obvious: make every new building bring its own parking. On a standard 7,500 square foot lot, the default parcel for post-war apartment development across the San Fernando Valley, Hollywood, and West LA, building a separate parking structure was economically impossible without eliminating most of the rentable units. Developers had a problem. The city required parking. The lots weren't big enough to put parking beside the building. Digging underground was expensive. The solution they found was elegant, cheap, and structurally catastrophic. Put the parking underneath the building. Cantilever the upper floors on thin columns over the carport bay. Eliminate the ground floor walls to create the required open space. This is not a shortcut. This is not negligence. This is the only economically viable answer to a legal requirement on a standard size lot. The 1946 parking ordinance did not suggest the dingbat. It required the physical form that makes the dingbat collapse. From 1950 to 1975, this formula reproduced itself across the entire city. Architect and dingbat historian Alan Hess, quoted in the Los Angeles Times in 2016, was direct about why it finally stopped. It wasn't an awareness of its seismic vulnerability that stopped the expansion of dingbats. It was more to do with the price of land. When parcels got expensive enough to assemble into larger developments, underground parking became viable, and the dingbat economic logic dissolved. The dangerous form did not end because the city stopped it. It ended because the math changed. Tokyo, by contrast, built its post-war residential density around transit infrastructure, not automobile storage. Without a parking mandate forcing open ground floors, Tokyo's residential stock did not systematically hollow out its base. When Japan's 1981 seismic standard arrived, there was far less to correct. The regulatory environment that produced the dingbat was specifically American, specifically Angelino, specifically 1946. The paper trail starts in the late 1960s. California engineers began systematically identifying the open ground floor soft story configuration as a seismic collapse hazard. This is while dingbats are still being constructed under the 1946 parking mandate. The structural community had the diagnosis before the construction wave ended. Then came the events. In 1971, the Sylmar earthquake struck Los Angeles at magnitude 6.6. Soft story failures were documented. The lesson was available. In 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake hit at magnitude 6.9. San Francisco's Marina District, densely packed with soft story buildings over ground floor retail and parking, suffered severe structural failures. It was nationally covered. Los Angeles building officials studied the Marina District damage. No mandatory retrofit ordinance followed. 5 years after the Marina District, on January 17, 1994, at 4:31 in the morning, the Northridge earthquake struck at magnitude 6.7. At Northridge Meadows Apartments on Reseda Boulevard, a soft-story building, the upper 2 floors pancaked onto the ground floor parking level. 16 people died in one building. Over 200 soft-story buildings across the city collapsed or were severely damaged. The dominant structural failure category of the event was the same geometry engineers had been documenting since the late 1960s. What followed? 19 years of no mandatory requirement. No landlord obligation to disclose soft story status to potential tenants. No publicly searchable database. A Caltech study cited in building safety records found that of Los Angeles's estimated 20,000 soft story buildings, only 800 had been voluntarily improved in the entire period between Northridge and the eventual ordinance. The LA City Council ordered a study in 2013, ordered a catalog in 2014. City inspectors spent 2 years walking block to block to identify dingbats. The full list wasn't completed until 2016. The retrofit ordinance was signed in November 2015, 21 years after Northridge. The reasons are documented: landlord lobby resistance, retrofit costs ranging from $20,000 to over $350,000 per building, fear of displacement litigation under rent stabilization rules, the political difficulty of mandating expensive modifications on the housing stock that serves the city's lowest income renters. Every factor is real. None of them is hidden. The delay was not a secret. It was a negotiation that took 2 decades. Japan's response to its equivalent moment was different. After the 1995 Great Hanshin earthquake in Kobe, most of the buildings that collapsed had been built before 1981. Japan passed the act to promote seismic retrofit of buildings the same year. Seismic diagnosis was subsidized. School retrofits were nationally funded. The timeline from catastrophic earthquake to national legislation was months. Los Angeles took 21 years. In November 2015, when Garcetti signed ordinances 183893 and 184081, the announcement was genuinely significant: a unanimous city council vote. The nation's most ambitious mandatory seismic retrofit program. 13,500 buildings on the list, organized into priority tiers with phased compliance deadlines. Priority 1, buildings with 16 or more units, or 3 or more stories with ground floor commercial occupancy, was required to complete retrofits by April 2024. Priority 2, smaller buildings under 16 units, had until April 2026. The program was real. The deadlines were real. The city staffed a dedicated soft-story seismic retrofit office at the Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety with engineers and inspectors. Progress happened. As of early 2024, approximately 6,500 of the 13,500 buildings had completed retrofits. That is nearly half. That is also thousands of buildings past their legal deadline, with the city only recently beginning to issue fines. In unincorporated county areas outside the city's jurisdiction, compliance fell to under 30%. Now comes the second reversal. The 13,500 buildings on that list are not luxury apartments. They are among the last large concentrations of rent-stabilized affordable housing in Los Angeles, predominantly occupied by low-income renters in Hollywood, the San Fernando Valley, East Hollywood, and West Los Angeles. Retrofit costs run from $20,000 to $44,000 for smaller buildings, up to $350,000 and beyond for the largest, averaging roughly $11,000 per unit. In January 2016, 2 months after the ordinance was signed, the Los Angeles City Council voted to allow landlords to pass half of those retrofit costs directly to tenants through rent increases. Larry Gross, executive director of the Coalition for Economic Survival, which advocates for renters in Los Angeles, was unambiguous. Tenants deserve to know how safe their apartments are. But the mechanism the city created to protect people's lives is the same mechanism that raises the rent of the people most at risk of dying. Owners who cannot absorb the remaining costs are pursuing Ellis Act evictions, selling to investors, or demolishing. The fix is working its way through the building stock and working its way through the tenant population at the same time. Tokyo's retrofit program offered free seismic diagnosis to building owners, direct government subsidies for construction costs, and tax reductions. The cost was treated as a public safety obligation. The people living in the buildings were not asked to fund the fix. In Los Angeles, they were. Go back to the building. Somewhere in Hollywood, or Palms, or Van Nuys, or East Hollywood, there is a stucco box on a row of thin metal columns, 2 stories above an open carport, a faded name in mid-century script on the front, the Riviera, or El Camino, or something with a palm tree in the logo, carport below, apartments above, no walls at ground level. You know now what that gap means. It is not a design choice some developer made on a whim. It is the physical residue of a 1946 ordinance that required off-street parking for every residential unit in the city, enforced on lots too small to put the parking anywhere else. The open bay is the legal consequence of a rule written before the first dingbat was built. Engineers documented the collapse geometry in the late 1960s. The 1971 Silmar earthquake confirmed it. The 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake confirmed it again, visibly, in San Francisco, in front of the entire country. Northridge confirmed it in 1994, with 16 deaths in a single building. The city waited 21 years to mandate a fix. The fix is currently less than half complete, past its own deadlines, unevenly enforced, and generating the displacement of the low-income renters it was designed to protect. Tokyo, facing the same seismic exposure on the same Pacific fault system, treated this class of problem as a national emergency in 1995, subsidized and legislated and executed its way through the housing stock, and reached 90% national housing seismic safety by 2023. Los Angeles is somewhere between 48% and 50% on a list that took 2 years to compile for a problem that was formally documented before the building stopped being constructed. The USGS shakeout scenario projects that a magnitude 7.8 on the southern San Andreas Fault would shake the region for nearly 2 minutes. Over 1,800 deaths, 50,000 injuries, $200 billion in damage. Dingbat-dense neighborhoods in the direct corridor. Southern California faces a 93% probability of a magnitude 6.7 or greater by 2043. Somewhere in Los Angeles tonight, someone is sleeping above an open carport bay in a building manufactured by a parking rule, flagged by engineers 50 years ago, confirmed lethal 30 years ago, and still not fixed. The big one is not a hypothetical. It is a scheduled appointment, and approximately half of LA's most dangerous buildings still have the same open ground floor they were built with in 1963.